So we are in the midst of trying to get into contact with the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of the human rights in North Korea. He is Tomas Ojea Quintana. And so the reason why we're having this interview is he was in Korea. He was on a 9-day mission. He was investigating the human rights situations on the peninsula. And obviously, we have other issues in play here, including the very serious pandemic and the COVID-19 situation, how it's been affecting, especially some of the murky and kind of non-transparent way North Korea has gone about with those things, how a lot of us still aren't really clear about the actual facts on the ground. So to help us out with all of these questions, we're very pleased to be joined by Tomas Ojea Quintana, UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on the line. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Sir, thank you very much for joining us and appreciate your time. Our audience here in Korea very much interested in your assessment of the situation. We have sanctions regimes in place against North Korea. They are also going through the COVID-19 pandemic. They have a chronic food shortage, which seems to have exacerbated this year. Could you brief us on how serious the situation is right now?
Yes, thank you. So the situation seems to be very serious and aggravating, especially on the access to adequate food of very important segments of the population in North Korea. And that has been aggravated basically because of after the government decided to close the borders to prevent an outbreak of COVID-19. All that measures have brought a lot of problems to the ordinary citizens, those who rely on in the market front and so on. So we are very concerned about the situation of access to adequate food, as I say. You may know that according to credible statistics, almost 40% of the population in North Korea are food insecure. And this situation was even asked before the pandemic. So that's why the United Nations, especially the humanitarian bodies, are quite concerned about the situation on the ground.
You have mentioned in an interview, sir, that the COVID-19 vaccines, they can be a way to have North Korea reopen their borders. Could you elaborate on that and why you feel that is the case?
Yes, thank you for that question. To try to clarify my stance on this, we know that in North Korea, the government has dismissed a number of vaccines that were offered by the COVAX system, that provides a number of vaccines to the countries around the world. But the fact is that the government has rejected that. So what I have heard from a number of different interlocutors while I was on mission last week in Seoul, in Korea, is that the government, the authorities in North Korea don't want to receive just one set of vaccines without guarantees of receiving, the second shots for the vaccines. And I think that could be a legitimate concern by the government. So it is now, I believe, that the opportunity to discuss with the government the terms for them to receive the 60 million vaccines that would need for 2 shots for all the population. Of course, the mechanism to decide this and to implement this, basically to give the vaccines to the country, is not easy. And you are right in this respect. The government of North Korea will have to pay, of course, money for those vaccines. Then the question would be, what is the capacity of North Korea with hard currency to pay for that? But anyway, I think that it's a need to for the international community, and I also heard that also the European Union is willing to have a more active role in this respect. I think it is time to discuss this because, again, going back to your first question, it's very serious the level of isolation in the country. Mm-hmm. And I think that the key, as I say, to open, at least for the government to lift the control in the border areas and allow more trade depends on this issue. I think that the government is really concerned about COVID-19, still the possibility of an outbreak in the country, and they take COVID-19 as a security issue, and not only as a health issue but also a security issue.
There is this one question we're curious to get your thoughts on. North Korea has rejected support from the COVAX initiative, and you kind of wonder, do they not like the AstraZeneca vaccine, or is there some other reason? Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I have to be cautious because the information is not quite detailed in this aspect. We don't really know some information that indicates that North Korean government would prefer, I think, Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. I cannot confirm this information, but it was received by me. So that could be one of the reasons, some preference with regards to the kind of vaccines they would like to receive. Mm-hmm. All this needs to be part of a discussion with the government and to have a discussion what is needed now. Even in these war circumstances all over the world, is space for dialogue with the government of North Korea.
Now, except for the issue of food shortages and obviously with this concern over the COVID-19 pandemic, your mandate, official title, obviously, UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. How do you currently assess the human rights situation in North Korea?
It's worsening, unfortunately. So we have some patterns of human rights abuses in North Korea that continues throughout, the decades. You have the political prison camps. That situation has been, a serious concern from the human rights point of view already for many years, even back we all remember the report of the Commission of Inquiry in North Korea established by the United Nations in 2014. That commission was very important with a groundbreaking report and established that the situation in political prison camps is extremely serious, may take crimes against humanity. That kind of patterns of human rights abuses continue in the country. The issue of ill treatment of prisoners in not only political prison camps but also in ordinary detention facilities seems to continue in the country, and another similar patterns of human rights abuses. But now the situation seems to be aggravating, basically due to the international context, plus the COVID-19 pandemic. So the country is more isolated as ever, and that means that the people living in the country could be subject of more serious human rights abuses. Actually, we know that last December, the leadership passed a kind of rule or legislation which basically punishes with even more harsh penalties those who pretend to access to foreign information, simple information like art information, cultural information, you can be punished harshly with that. So this is new. That's why the situation seems to be aggravating, and that's why it is more necessary than ever to try to establish contact with the authorities.
Now, in addressing human rights, the UN Security Council have issued resolutions for well over a decade and a half. Do you feel that those resolutions do have any effect or any benefit in terms of contributing and helping the human rights situation?
So just to clarify, it is the Human Rights Council of the United Nations who has been passing resolutions for many years. The Security Council has taken up the issue of North Korea some time ago. That was suspended. But anyway, your question is valid. It's valid because we have been watching the United Nations having meetings. My mandate as a reporter, for example, was established in 2004, and since then we have been having resolutions condemning the human rights abuses, urging North Korea to change track, urging North Korea to cooperate with the UN, with my mandate. And then the question is valid. What is the impact on the ground? I have no clear answers to that question, to be honest. Being realistic, what I believe is that the pressure needs to keep up at the United Nations with these resolutions. And by the way, your audience should know that these resolutions are passed by consensus in the Human Rights Council in Geneva. What I mean is, there is no any vote against this resolution. That's very important. That pressure needs to keep up so North Korea understands that some patterns and some policies currently and for decades being implemented in the country need to change. If North Korea wants to be a respectful member of the international community, it needs to change a number of patterns that basically entail serious human rights abuses. That's very important to keep it up. Now, and finally, to respond to your question, realistically speaking, I believe and I always push for an engagement with the government because I believe that changes should come also through engagement with the government, where you can, for example, discuss the rights of persons with disabilities, and you can see a little bit improvement in respect, where you can discuss the right to education, you can discuss the right to access to health, you can discuss the issue of water and sanitation. There is a human rights expert on water and sanitation. So what I think is that it's a lot of nuances and windows of opportunity if there is a space for dialogue to start raising these human rights issues. So basically, my answer is we have to go together with the resolutions, keep the resolutions on the agenda, but also try to reach out with the authorities.
Now, there are complicated reasons for this, and every government has their own sort of sovereign way of addressing the situation. South Korea, for their part, over the past 3 years, have not partaken in those human rights, UN human rights resolutions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, you are right in the sense that every country has, their own sovereignty to make decisions. And in the case of the current South Korean administration, what they decided, and this is a point of clarification, it's not that they are not participating in the resolution, approval resolution. They are actually participating in the South Korea. It's not that they are not. But it is true that they decided to stop co-sponsoring. This could be a technicality, but means that South Korea used to be an active participant in drafting the resolution. You see what I mean? That has been changed by the current administration. And again, while recognizing that it is the right of any sovereign state to take these decisions, I expressed my disappointment about it. Because we were talking later about the importance of keeping up the agenda of human rights in the United Nations. And these kind of steps back basically are against this principal idea of maintaining the attention of the human rights situation in the North. So that's why it is basically a wrong message to North Korea doing these kind of things. And that's my point of view. And I have discussed this with the authority of South Korea, with the Minister for Foreign Affairs and other authorities. And I made my point, and I hope that after reviewing all steps, the government will go back to, again, be an active participant in the drafting the resolution, which is co-sponsoring the resolution.
Right. And as you well know, there is a big presidential election going on here in Korea, and voters are set to select their new leader, and they'll be waging a lot of different issues in their mind to try to select their new leader. I think, quite frankly, quite bluntly, North Korea is important, but maybe the human rights situation in North Korea is not necessarily top of mind of South Korean voters when they're making their decision to choose a new president. I think we can agree on that. I guess overall, what do you feel is important for a new leader in South Korea to address in terms of what they have to prioritize? Obviously, they have to prioritize the pandemic. They have to prioritize domestic issues like the economy and all of these things. But what do you hope a new president of South Korea will be looking at going forward in terms of a lot of these issues that we've just discussed today?
I hope that the next administration wouldn't just erase everything that the current administration has done, to be very frank with you. It's not a matter of giving support to one or to the other different political parties. I am not a politician. I am an independent expert from the other part of the world. But frankly, I'm saying this because maybe it's not the human rights in North Korea, but I have the sense that people in South Korea, of course, cares about North Korea overall. You know, would be human rights, but it's also the nuclear problem, and it's also security, and it's also many other things. So by saying that, I hope that the new administration does not erase completely what has been done, because I believe that South Korea could send throughout the years, and regardless of the changes of the political parties governing the country, should have a consistent approach to the North, you know? And that doesn't mean that, of course, democracy is not important. Precisely it's the contrary. I think that under a democratic system, you can agree as a country in a very specific policy, very crucial policy, which is North Korea, and then try to maintain and keep the good things from different policies throughout the years. That's my view. I hope that doesn't happen, because it's going to be, basically drastic changes from one administration to the other, in very short periods of time. So I think it should be a state policy how to engage to deal with North Korea. And you can combine, of course, pressure and cooperation. It's a challenge to keep those strategies at the same time, and that's how I see is the best for South Korea to deal with the North, to be honest.
Well, Mr. Quintana, we certainly have appreciated your time you've spent. I know it's a busy schedule, and to give us so much of your time is certainly something that we're grateful for. Thank you for lending us your perspective. Obviously, best of luck to you in your role as a special rapporteur until the end of your term, and hopefully we can get a chance to talk again soon. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate your words and all the rest.
Thank you. That was Tomas Ojea Quintana, UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the DPRK. We will take another short break. We're going to be back with Economy Tutor. We're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the economic effects that have ensued, including what sanctions will do and what will happen to South Korea as well. Stay tuned.